Welcome to the introduction for our Illustrate project. What you're looking at right now is the project sheet that's also been shared with you on Google Classroom. There should be copies of this project sheet on the bookshelf in Miss Boone's room. If you look carefully and read, you'll find that the lesson objective is down in the left corner. You are to build in Illustrator one object. Start by going to the internet and finding a high-resolution image to work from. Man-made objects are best, so we're talking about things that are made of metal, plastic, things like that. Certain things that will not work for you are anything in nature, flowers, landscapes, people. Those things are going to be more difficult. That is not what I want you to choose. Some examples from students' previous work include car rims, watches, gears, keys, cameras, those types of things. Things that are man-made. I've even had students do Legos in the past. Your job is to trace the shadow areas. I want you to pay attention to the darker areas of the picture and trace them with your pen tool. This project should be in black and white only, no color. Okay, this is a fill-based illustration, meaning there will be no stroke colors in this design. All of the thin lines that you see, for example, this camera was the original image. And this is a fill-based illustration. All these thin lines you see are not actually strokes. I can tell because when I click on it, let me ungroup this. When I click on it, it needs to be ungrouped one more time. The fill color should be black, which is true. Okay, look carefully. You can see exactly where those anchor points are, right? You can see exactly where they are. It is not a fill color. It is it is not a stroke color. It is a fill color. It is a shape. Okay, so that means if I have a thin line, I'm actually drawing a rectangle, right? Look at this one. Okay. So the first place that I want you to look, I'm going to share with you a website where you can find some high quality photos. Yes, you can go to Google. Just be aware that the resolution is going to affect how pixelated your picture is when you zoom in. File size for this project is 10 inches by 10 inches. Remember to name your files correctly. Hopefully you've been doing this so far this semester. The proper naming convention is your last name, underscore your first name, underscore the project name. In this case, it's Illustrate. Okay. Let's go to the internet and see if we can find a good website. So the one that I'm going to suggest you use is Pexels, not Pixels, Pexels, Pexels.com. This is what it looks like when you go to it. It's pretty simple. You search what you're looking for. Say I'm looking for gears. I can search gears just like Google, and I can find images of gears. Okay. Pay attention to the light and dark areas as you're searching for a picture. Remember, this is what you're going to have to trace. Let's see what else I can find. Guitar. This has also been a popular one in the past. Let's see if I can find one that I can show you is a good example, right? Again, I'm paying attention to the light and dark areas. Here's one that students have done in the past, okay? You will be tracing the dark areas, right? Light versus dark. You're not going to trace the strings individually, but you're going to trace the darker places in between, right? So you're going to trace dark. If I find a picture that I like, I need to check with Miss Boone or Miss Crothamel to see if it will work. Why? Because we don't want to set you up for failure. Okay? So let us approve the picture before you start tracing. Once you have been approved, you can right-click on it, copy the image. Okay? In Illustrator, to get started, remember to create a new file, we're going to go to File, New, and I told you that the file size was 10 by 10, so 10 inches by 10 inches, and then push Create. Make sure it's only one artboard. You don't need any more than that right now. Okay, here's my blank artboard. So I copied my image. I can do one of two things. I can come up here and go to Edit and paste my image in. Notice how big it is. Or I can push the shortcut for paste, which is Control V. Okay, remember you can zoom in and out using Alt and the scroll wheel on your mouse. And I need to resize this. It is really important that when you're resizing images, you need to hold Shift on your keyboard. When you hold Shift, the proportions are locked, so you're not going to squish or stretch your picture. For example, if I don't hold Shift, this is what I can end up with. That is not good. If I see that your picture has been squished or stretched, I'm probably going to come over and make you fix it or start over. So make sure you are holding Shift when you resize your picture. It is okay if you have some extra space around your picture. Notice, my file size is 10 by 10, but I have some white space around it. That's okay. I just want your image to fit within 10 by 10. So hold Shift, make it fit within 10 by 10. If there's extra space, that's okay. Okay, so we've got a picture, we've got a file. Now I'm going to create some layers, okay? So this is really simple. We're going to go to our layers panel over here on the right. I'm going to reset my essentials so that you guys look exactly like mine. So if your screen doesn't look exactly like mine with the tools, go to essentials and reset essentials so that we're working on the same location of tools, okay? Once you've got your screen set up, on the right, you should see a tab that says layers. Click on it. Right now, when you create a new file, there should only be one layer. And that only thing in that layer is the image that we just pasted. I am going to lock this layer. And now I won't be able to draw on it. So I need a separate layer for my tracing. At the bottom of our layers panel, there's what looks like a blank piece of paper. Not the one with the arrow, just the blank one. If you hover, it says create new layer. We're going to create a new layer. Notice layer 2 came up. And now if I grab my pen tool, I should be able to start tracing. Right? So this is how we set up our file for tracing for the Illustrate project. Anytime you have images that you're trying to trace in Illustrator, it's probably a good idea to go ahead and set up a layer specifically for those images that you can lock. That way you don't accidentally move the image as you're trying to trace. If you really want to be organized, you can double click where it says layer 1 and you can rename your layer to something that makes sense to you. For example, I can put pictures. So any pictures that I have in this file, I can unlock this, make sure that it is highlighted blue. See how it's highlighted blue? And then I can paste a picture and lock it. In order for me to draw, I need to have my layer 2 selected. I can again double click and rename this to be my tracing or whatever makes sense to you. And then I'm going to just use my pen tool and start tracing. Remember, you're tracing the shadow areas, the dark things. Yes, it's going to be tedious. Yes, I want you to pay attention to details. A lot of times you have a tendency to start with the easy stuff, and that's totally fine. For example, for me, this pick guard right here, that's probably where I would start. Think back to our card symbols project, right? Our quiz, the card symbols quiz. Where do we start when we're tracing shapes? Smart to start on a corner, right? So I'm going to start on corners. Notice what happens when I'm going to trace. Look at that fill color. Why is it white? Well, it's white because all my computer is doing, it's trying to be smart. It's looking at where I started and where my last point was, and it's just drawing a straight line across and it's filling in with the white fill color. You can do one of two things. One, you can swap your stroke and your fill color over on the left so that it's a white stroke color. Or you could change the color if you wanted to come back to your properties panel on the right and change your stroke color to something that you can see a little easier. Or, like I like to do whenever I'm tracing, I like to click on my stroke and totally take the color out altogether. So that all I see is the fine line when I'm tracing. Notice, that last point, I didn't do that good of a job. I can undo, Control Z. And let me step back, take my color out again. And I can break this up a little bit, okay? Remember to curve your lines when you need to curve your lines. I don't want to see a whole lot of little straight lines tracing around the edges of these. curve your lines with that pen tool. Do your best of going back and fixing up those shapes as you're drawing. We want them to be smooth curves. That's part of your grade. Okay. Remember, you can do click backs. Look for that upside down V and click back and work your way back around to where you started. All of your shapes need to be complete shapes, just like they were for your card symbols project. Let's finish up this shape. Once you finish your shape, I like to fill in a color so that I can see what I've done. Right? You can come over to your properties panel, click on the fill, choose a color. That way you can see what you've done. If you try and make it black, what's going to happen is you're going to end up not being able to tell what shapes you've traced. Right? That looks pretty similar to the image. So if you leave it a different color, you'll be able to see what you've traced so far. Let's look at one more example. Okay, here is a car rim. Some folks get confused about what to trace for car rims. I've already got my layers all set up in this. My layer 2 is for all my shapes that I've traced, and my layer 1 is for my image. Let's take a look at the image without the tracing. Okay, remember, you can use your little eyeballs to toggle the visibility of your layer. Another reason why it's really helpful to have multiple layers when you're tracing an image. So let's hide that layer 2 again. Now, there are a lot of dark areas. I strategically chose this car rim because it's easy to tell what is dark and what is light. The more shapes that you create, the more this is going to look like a car rim. So even these fine lines, if you look real close, there's some fine little lines in here. You have to decide which ones are dark enough for you to make into shapes and which ones maybe you don't need. Here's all the ones that I've traced so far. Obviously, I have some left to go. But the more shapes that I add, the more it's going to look like a rim. Let me hide my picture and see what it looks like without my picture. So here's my car rim. You can tell it's starting to take on this circular shape. I've got a lot of really thin shapes to give it that dimension of being round. There's a lot more that I can do here. Adding the details is going to help a lot. So pay attention to details. I may even add some thin shapes up here to give it that roundness that it needs in the top. I've got a lot of dark areas over here that need to be traced as well. So do this carefully, and when you think you're done, go back and look. Hide your image. See what it looks like. Is there anything missing that you might need to add? For example, down here, I still need this dark shape. I may even need to add a thin line here, right? A thin shape here, to give it the appearance of being round on the bottom right now when it looks empty. Hopefully this has been helpful to you and helps you set up your Illustrate project. If you're curious about what you're going to be graded on, here's your grading objectives on your project sheet. Make sure you read this. Always read your project sheet. I am not just giving it to you for fun. It's because it's what you're supposed to be doing for your project. So hopefully this is helpful. Good luck on your Illustrate project.